Testing, testing. No, nothing. Hmm. Testing. Wonder what mic is on. Oh, cool. Okay, cool. Oh, there's probably a delay. That's why. Okay, so the first thing I did probably worked. Okay, okay, cool. All right. So all I said was I primarily wanted to jump on today to talk about the Neuralink stuff. Maybe cover a quick couple of news items today. I'm not gonna pull up the neurotech I've been working on. I was just saying I'm kind of burned out on that stuff, so I'm taking a break from it, and I need to work on some administrative stuff for that. But I'll probably do the neurotech stuff later in the future. But it's in a box behind me right now. But yeah, I just want to talk about the Neuralink stuff today, and yeah, maybe like one or two other things. All right, so let's go back into the coffee shop. And yeah, the only other thing I'd said was I hadn't looked at any of this before I got on. I just kind of wanted to read this live on stream, give reaction more. I don't know, less. I don't know, processed of reaction or whatever. So yeah, so I don't know if you saw this. They had a monkey playing a video game. I have no idea what the details are, so I was gonna hope to see what the details are live with you, along with you guys. Oh, is the YouTube? Okay, the YouTube's working. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's different delays. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so yeah, my first reaction to this in terms of having brain implants in monkeys and them controlling things is that we had this 20 years ago, which some of you might have known, some of you, maybe that surprises you. I worked next to labs that had brain implant monkeys and larger monkeys than this. They had, I always forget the difference between, chimps and gorillas and all that, but Berkeley had labs like this, UCSF had labs like this. Actually, one of the professors I worked right next to is a consultant for this, for Neuralink. What's his name? Flip Savies. So he definitely had labs with this stuff working. Anyway, so it's hard to know. My first assumption is when they say it's been wired up to play video games, it's probably just some simple like 2-button thing, where it can click one or the other. It's probably not like a 2-joystick thing that it's doing with its brain. So maybe it's the cynic in me, but this seems very underwhelming. But we'll see. We'll see. Also, keep in mind, maybe they did it in a way that was easier to set up. Maybe it was a smaller kind of fingerprint on the brain, or a smaller surgical hole and things like that. So those are all great improvements. I think the thing I'm going to stress over and over with Elon Musk's company is that what it appears to me to be is that they're not really going to solve the neural code problem. They're so far down the chain. They're just going to provide better hardware, if that makes any sense. So it's sort of shaping up to look like a medical device company. That's what it seems to me. And we'll get into that later, but you can kind of tell when you look at their job descriptions and stuff like that. Anyway, so they're highlighting the fact that the monkey doesn't seem to have any too much distress or anything. That it was a very non-traumatic procedure. That's cool. Um, you can see where the neural implant was put in, except he's got a slightly dark mohawk. I assume that means the part they had to shave. It's like a reverse mohawk, I'm assuming. Um, okay, oh, yeah, he became the richest person. Is the chimp reacting to where the eye attention is? I don't know. I'm hoping to see what they did. I don't know if they, it doesn't look like they published anything, so I'm hoping that, well, it'd be great if they came up with a publication, but a video or anything. So I'm just going to pull up whatever they got and see if we can infer what they probably did in detail. Um, I see. You're. Yeah. It's unlikely that they're. If you're trying to reference some of the stuff I've talked about, which is nice, somebody's listening. It's unlikely they're doing that stuff. They're more. It's more. It involves training where it doesn't really matter what you're looking at, or they're probably implanting in more of a motor part of your brain where it really doesn't matter what you're up to. So it's more that you learn to have it, two distinct thoughts, but even that sounds sensational. It's really just lateralizing activity. So it's really if you move like your entire right side of your body, the left motor cortex becomes very active. And then if you move the entire left side of your body, the right side of your motor becomes active. And if you have sensors in both positions and you can see which one is greater than the other, you can kind of have like a 2-button input without having to physically push a button. And then over time, you can learn to do this without actually doing this. You can just learn to like keep your arm still, but activate all that activity. And that's really what it is. And that's why this stuff does kind of doesn't seem that great to me, because it requires a lot of training. So with a monkey, what you can do is you can do the same thing. You could train them, and you can train them like marshmallows or whatever, just similar to humans, like sugar or anything. And you train them to do a very simple task where like some black and white screen, things pop up, and whenever something pops up on this side, they have to push a button. Whenever something pops up on that side, they push the other button. And then over time, you actually almost like handcuff their hands down so they can't move it. And with the implants, they learn over time that they actually don't have to move their arms. They just, they learn to somewhat unconsciously, somewhat consciously, kind of, it's a little, in one way, you could think of it's more lazy because you're not moving your arms. On the other hand, it's unnatural because you're activating your motor cortex. And then you're also activating inhibition of it, so you don't actually move your muscles. But you're still activating the premotor cortex. Cool. Is it limited to binary? Yeah. This is my guess. I can't imagine why they would do something more complicated, because that would be the first step to do. But in the media, they're not going to highlight that. So it's probably weeks of training. Maybe it's less now. Maybe they've figured out algorithms that can adapt to the brain faster in the research community, and Neuralink took some of those. But it's usually weeks of training, and then it's usually like a binary button thing. It's usually, a couple seconds between trials, sometimes a second. Monkeys are weirdly good at some visual tasks, like visual tasks meaning something pops up on the screen, you push a button. Sometimes they're better than, they can hit ceilings that are higher than humans, which is weird. I can't think of it right now. I don't want to misspeak, but there's like a task where they outperform humans actually. So yeah, they do that with marshmallows. They restrain their hands and arms, and so I'm guessing that's what it is. But I'm hopefully able to see some videos, and sometimes they have little clips of videos, and you can pause it and kind of see what they're doing. So hopefully we'll do that today. So yeah, I'm just looking at this article. Yeah, they talk about his other stuff he's worked on, like his AI lab and stuff. They're talking about the potential of having a direct neural interface. Yeah, this. Oh, yeah. Can you see on the screen? This is like a sort of primary motivator. It's talking about many orders of magnitude, 1,000 being 3 orders of magnitude, 10,000 being 4 orders of magnitude. With a direct neural interface, you can improve the bandwidth between your brain essentially and some sort of digital device by many orders of magnitude. Is all they're saying. Right. Well, maybe not correct. I mean, this is where, you know, most things in the literature where we do with monkeys and humans is, as you said, binary. You know, or maybe we're able to extend it to a few options. So we haven't demonstrated this, but to argue for this, the way Elon Musk is spending money, what he's doing might be the right thing to do, which is to first try to miniaturize it, make it more usable. They like saying the word form factor, but it just basically means you have something that's smaller. You know, you can imagine like, you know, how clunky like computers were back in the day, or calculators or anything like that, where you'd have a like a dedicated like I don't know if you guys ever like a TI-89 or TI-83, those big graphing calculators, and now you can do the same thing on a phone, or even, you know, eventually probably the Apple Watches will have enough computing power. I don't know, but the idea of just things being smaller, and then the user, not necessarily the user interface, but in this case, the people who would be using this device, like the people who would be either implanting this device, like surgeons, or you know, maybe technicians that would be helping you calibrate or whatever was required. So the idea that the user interface to them, those intermediate workers, get a little better. So that's what people usually mean by form factor in engineering. And so him working on that might be that incremental step that actually is the right thing to do. As much as I usually criticize it, that is the argument, and I think that there's a lot of logic to that. Yeah, we'll look at this video for sure. I think that's the video I pulled up, right? And then I just want to see if there's any other information in this thing. This is the end of the article. The cortex is the part of the brain that plays a key role in memory, attention, yada yada yada. Yeah, so this is where long-term says it could allow humans to send concepts to one another using telepathy, exist in a saved state after they die, yada yada. So that is crazy, because that's the stuff that gets communicated, and we're talking about binary control after weeks of training. In order to do something like this, like for instance the concept thing, let's just take that as an example. And I this is probably part of his vision. You'd have to cover so much of the cortex, and have these invasive, essentially metal detectors or whatever they are. Maybe they're carbon fiber at this point. I actually don't know. There's something that supposedly causes the least amount of sclerosing, they call it, which is just like scar tissue buildup in your brain around these sensors, which is your brain does naturally. Which is cool, because like if you get a parasite in your brain, I actually when I used to be in medicine, I had 2 different patients who got something called neurocystosarcosis, which is pig parasites. So you know, if you eat raw fish, you can get parasites. If you eat raw pork, you can get parasites. And the pork ones are more dangerous because they can actually travel to your brain. And what's interesting, I mean, or maybe it's horrifying, I don't know, but it's interesting, or it's better than nothing, is that your body, or including your brain, will naturally form scar tissue around these parasites. So it sort of you know, kind of forms like a little jail cell or something. It's just pure collagen, like a sphere of collagen around the parasite, and then that collagen gets more and more kind of dehydrated over time and tougher. And then, so when you scan somebody, you sometimes see a couple of these, like I did a few times in medicine. And, you know, if possible, you give them drugs that will kill the parasite inside, although you want them to die in a way where they just die and they shrivel up. You don't want them to explode in lice because that will cause an immune reaction. And sometimes if you have to go in there surgically, but you try to avoid cracking open the brain always in medicine. So that the same thing can kind of happen when you insert probes or sensors or anything into the brain as well, because your body's very good at identifying things that are foreign, or it's reasonably good. Maybe we'll be better and better at tricking it in the future. So, and it primarily does that by, I don't know how interesting it is. I'm just remembering some of the stuff as I say it out loud. It does that by like ionic differences. A lot of your tissue, I don't remember anymore, is either like negatively charged and because there's a lot of like chloride and other ions, or and there's also sodium and potassium, which are positively charged. Anyway, I forget which one it is. It has a slight charge to it. There's a difference, and so that's primarily one thing. And then also by surface proteins and stuff like that. So it's not that we can't eventually figure out ways to trick the brain, which technologically would be advantageous for us or good for us, because we could maybe put in tons of sensors and not have the brain forming scar tissue all around these things. Partly because it degrades the ability for the sensor to detect things, and then maybe it's not so good for our brain to have all that scar tissue, but it might be fine with it. Who knows? Anyway, the idea of even capturing concepts and sending it to it. This is my biggest pet peeve with him, because he does this tortured genius act in public. Like, he goes on Rogan, he has like this tortured genius, and I don't know, I have so many thoughts in my brain and I can't even get it out, and the human language isn't sophisticated enough for my thinking, and maybe I'm an alien, that kind of thing. And then he ties it into this stuff and it's just like, that's not how the brain works. If you have prototypical thoughts or concepts that aren't articulated, then that's all they are. That's why you have to write or speak. You have to practice these things, because that formulates them, that adds the context and details. And if you haven't done that yet, then in specificity is where it actually gets more detailed and interesting. And the process of going from the proto concept to the specific concept is everything about intelligence. So anyway, but yeah, it's hard because these concepts in your brain, they're say broad generalizations or categorizations. Concepts mean a lot of things in our language, but say that's what we're talking about. It can exist across a network, say in your parietal regions mostly. So you'd have to cover and infiltrate a lot of the parietal cortex. Anyway, yeah, and then the whole save state after you die thing, I'm sure you guys, I think sci-fi covers that pretty well. The whole philosophical concept of, if you replicate something that looks very, very, and acts very similar to you, is it you, and do you still die, and how much do you care if you're dead and the other thing thinks it's you, and all that stuff. But anyway, okay, so this is near the end of the article. Quadriplegics have brain and spinal injury so that they can control. Yeah, and they have this already in humans. They did this 15, 20 years ago, famously with, I don't remember the guy's name, but John Donahue, I don't remember his name. But yeah, they did this, I think at Brown University or something, almost 20 years ago. So I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get through these animal trials so that they can get an FDA approved device, and that when people get these implants in the hospital for, especially these really, though it's for the worst cases. It's for like absolute paraplegia. And it becomes a quality of life issue, because all they can do is often move their eyes or something. And if these guys can be the premier device and replace the existing whatever's out there right now, which is cool. I mean, it's sort of a modernization of something, but in a lot of ways, a lot of the stuff is kind of figured out. They're just trying to modernize it in any way they can. And I see a lot of Fitbit. Yeah, here's the end of the article. Yeah, see right here at the end. If someone is good at designing Fitbit, Apple Watches, phones, let me make sure it's on the screen. Yeah, of various kinds, then they would be a great fit for Neuralink. So let's look at this job link, and then let's look at let's also look at. Oh, it's just this video. Okay, I already pulled up this video. Okay. You know what? Let's also look at Neuralink's job career page, because I told you this is the move. Because you can see what their priorities are whenever you look at a career page. It's very simple. You know, if you ever work in investing, you know, if you ever have to do an audit on a company, I don't know. If you're just a journalist and you're curious, it's not loading up. Okay, there it goes. So right, they got animal, vet stuff. That's cool. And if you guys are interested, apparently they're in the Bay Area and Austin. So just as like they're sponsoring me. Okay. Yeah. So they have it's electrical engineering, embedded systems firmware engineer. So they're trying to make the onboard chips. Equipment engineer. I don't know what that is. I might just look at the description really fast. General application, manufacturing technician, senior electrical engineer, software engineer for probably lab software or something like that. A robotic electrical engineer. Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of engineers. Again, which is cool. That's, you know, at some point you want to stop doing science and you want to like build stuff. So that's part of the philosophical difference, I suppose. Between the richest guy in the world who actually, you know, maybe is a little overhyped in what he's accomplished, but he has modernized a few things, which is good, which is very, very cool. And myself, who's basically just, you know, a mediocre scientist at best. So head of construction, histology technician. Oh, they do have a neuroengineer. I'm curious what that job description looks like. Infrastructure. So yeah, it's all very industry stuff. Software engineer would be, man, I might have to look at these things. So they have an equipment engineer at Neuralink. I clicked on this one because I actually didn't know what this was. I was like, what do they mean by this? Blah blah blah. You're it's like what job description would be like? You lack passion. You know, you hate working with other people. You know, they always say the same stuff. So anyway, key qualifications. Okay, pneumatic, mechanical, and electrical repair. I wondered. This is probably for the surgical device that's going to implant the chips. I'm guessing that because I don't know why you would need pneumatics. What's a neuroengineer? I'm gonna get to that. Yeah, that's one of them I pulled up. Oh yeah, you can't see my tabs, but I pulled up 4 of them. So that's the last one. I definitely want to look at that one too. I was curious what they meant by equipment engineer. Semiconductor processing. Oh yeah, you guys probably can't read that. Let me blow it up a little bit. Sorry guys. There we go. Semiconductors, programables, vacuum pumps, gas delivery systems, robotic systems. Yeah, so this is, oops, there it is. So it's, yeah, I think it's for the robotics that implant. They have these, maybe we'll see it in the video. They have these robotic devices. They don't use their hands anymore. They use these robot devices to do surgery, like if you do minimally invasive surgery. So if you get your gallbladder out at like a tier 1 university hospital now, you may very well get it done minimally invasively, laparoscopically, which means, so the old way, which I used to do too, you slice the person open around the liver, and big enough to, like, you know, you can stick your hands in there and you can separate everything out and you find the gallbladder and you clip it and you ligate it and you close everything up. Then they came out with minimally invasive, which you ended up, this is so long ago, you put 2 or 3 ports, I don't remember, but you put 3 holes in the abdomen, and you're using tools, not robots, and then you separate out all the, because you have all this connective tissue that in the abdomen, so you separate that out with like something metal, not something sharp, but something metal is enough to separate it, and then you put some gas in there and you expand it, and then you have a camera, you have like a pincher tool, and then maybe you have a cutter tool. And so you pinch things, you cut things, you change it out, you put a little ligating tool, and you have a camera, and you're doing this all with your arms and hands, and like a couple people doing it. And I did it that way too. And then right as I was, last time I probably did a surgical rotation was 2008. They were coming out with the Da Vinci robots, and I got to use those too, just once or twice. They were experimenting with them at Madison, which is where I went to med school, and that you just sit at there's these like binoculars, and you put your face on it, and they're 3D because they're giving you different images into every eye, different eyes. You have stereoscopic, and you put your hands underneath into these there's these little rings, and you put your fingertips into them, and you can move it, and then and that controls the robot arms. And so you're just looking and doing this, and then the patient's like a couple feet over, and it was this giant machine. I don't know if it's that big anymore, but it was back then it was kind of awful because it took hours to set up, and the surgery itself normally would take maybe an hour or 45 minutes to do normally, and it took hours because you had to park this giant machine that was like lifted up by industrial equipment over the patient that was under anesthesia. And that's all bad too, because you want to minimize people's time under anesthesia, but it was experimental at the time, so I assume they've gotten it better than that. But that was the last time that's the state I saw it in. And at the time it was Da Vinci it was called, and I think there's probably other competitors now. So anyway, my point being that they're probably developing something similar to that. So they're developing the tools to implant it as well as the device. And then my other point being, they're probably not working on like the neural signal problem much at all. They're probably just importing whatever the universities have at this point and just leaving it as is, even though he talks about it as if that's what they're mostly doing. That's my take on it. So yeah, that's why they have all this pneumatic gas delivery systems. Oh, you can't see that. Pneumatic gas and delivery systems. I assume because they're building like a Da Vinci. That's my take on it. All right, we'll get off this job description in a second. CAD and okay, cool. I just didn't know what an equipment engineer was. So okay. All right, let's get out of this one. Let's go to the next one. Let me pull this down a little bit. Okay. I was curious. This one says general. Maybe. Oh, I see. It's just an open one. So if you for some reason want to apply and you don't fit in these categories, they just give you a button to push and maybe somebody looks at it. Yeah, interesting. I wonder how open a company's like that too. I wonder what would happen if I had applied to the general, just like, oh, I have all these degrees and experience, but I'm not actually an electrical engineer. I'm not actually useful for the work you guys are doing. All right, let's on to the neuroengineer, and then what's the last one? The BMI one. Okay, let's do these two. All right, because I guess a lot of my audience might be more in these categories. I don't know. Although I don't know how many of you are actual engineers and how many of you just got science degrees like I did. So anyway, all right, let's get past the fluff. Right. Evidence, exceptional ability in neuroscience, biomedical engineering, scientific method, engineering first principles, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Proficiency in Python. Yeah, these things are always written so broadly though. They'd rather not scare people away than, and waste your time as an applicant rather than, C++. I did C++. Huh. It's been a while, but I programmed a video game in C++. Experience building and programming experimental instrumentation. Interesting. I wonder what instrumentation. It's probably just scripting anyway, so I guess if you're Python or something scripting related, that's probably good enough. Microscopy and optics. I wonder why. That's weird. I don't know. stats and machine learning, in vivo electrophysiology, wake behavioral recordings. So it's interesting because they're, at this level, this is more for people who work in like rat labs, or I guess there's people who work directly on direct human recordings too, but he believes people can learn everything without college. Yeah, it's interesting though, because most people I used to live in LA, and everybody I ran into who worked at SpaceX were all engineers from good schools. So I think it's a little bit of a bullshit on his part again. He hires a lot of American educated engineers, so it's not actually how he acts, but I know he says that primarily because he was going to go to grad school or whatever, and never did that, which, how do I say this? It's so bad because I feel like I'm reacting to the hype about him, and then I sound very negative. And I really love entrepreneurial people think out of the box, all that stuff. It's just the hype about him is that like he did it all on his own. And when you read the biography about him, not the autobiography, I found it really fascinating because he moved to the United States with his brother, and his brother and him. So first of all, he had a sibling who was insanely dedicated too, and they were both working like 80 hours a week on this thing. His dad, who doesn't even talk to, who has a really terrible relationship, gave him like $50,000 or $60,000. I didn't come from a family that could do anything like that. I don't think my family would give me, $500. And to give a shot at the company. On top of it, his mom moved from South Africa to San Francisco and was just like around supporting them emotionally. They don't cover any of this stuff. Like, he benefited from an insanely supportive family, along with a brother who's technically competent and willing to also go all in with him. And the whole solar panel stuff are two cousins of his that are also, business savvy, willing to do this stuff at some level of middle class where they can risk trying this stuff and they don't have to go after the more guaranteed paths. So his view is a little warped because it sounds like they were pretty upper middle class in South Africa. And I'm just saying you can't take what he's saying directly and apply it to your life necessarily, because maybe that's not your situation. Every time I try to do anything, I email out, my very weak social network, my friends, and nobody's gonna go in with me on anything. They're all working very average jobs, and they're not gonna risk their lives even to quit for 6 months to try to work on something with me. I don't have a network like that. I don't have any siblings like that would do that. So I don't know. I'm just saying there's a little take it with a little salt. Take the advice with a little salt. Take it with caveats. So anyway, I just found it interesting. When I read the book. So again, I think he's a very special person. I'm glad people like him and him in particular exist. I'm glad that the richest person in the world is working on rockets and brain stuff, and it's all good. I just think they try to strip away some of the advantages he might have had to make the story seem even more sensational. And that's fine if you're just looking to be entertained or inspired, but then you go to the next step of trying to take lessons from that, and you might find yourself frustrated because maybe you're just lucky to be in college right now, and maybe you're just lucky to be getting through your degree, and maybe getting a decent paying job is going to be a huge victory for you. Like they don't emphasize that stuff, and a lot of people I know, that is their situation. Some of the guys I graduated with PhDs from Berkeley with, it took them a year to find a job, and now they have a job. They're not gonna risk it. They're not gonna look for other. They're not gonna throw the dice or anything. So I don't know. These things don't get they get de-emphasized for the sake of the inspiring and more entertaining narratives. So which is fine again, but I think the problem is most people start trying to apply it to their own life, and maybe that's just me, but that's what I try to do, and I end up getting frustrated sometimes. So, anyway, sorry guys, I went on a ramble there. We're looking at neuroengineer at Neuralink. So microscopy, optics, modern statistical inference, and machine learning. So the in vivo stuff that makes sense. The thing that confused me here is the microscopy and optics, but everything else makes sense to me. And then behavioral paradigms in animal models. So they're going to be working with animals for a long time. And there's a lot of job stuff where they want vets and animal handlers and stuff like that. So that makes sense. And they have to get past what they probably need to do right now. What they're working on is preparing a phase 0 report for the FDA. So phase 0 is usually animal studies, whether you're dealing with pharmaceuticals. And that's really like safety and toxicity, as well as beneficial effects you anticipate. So, and then prior to that with pharmaceuticals, often it's like they're working with cell cultures, right? And then phase 0 is usually animals. And then phase 3 is the big studies you usually see. That's where the stock market and Wall Street go crazy because they have a giant, like 20,000 person phase 3 for drug trials. And that's where they're trying to prove it's better than some either status quo or whatever standard out there, and also, as well as continue to prove that the side effects or dangers of it are worth the benefits, or anyway, so then phase 2 and phase 1 are like the smaller ones. So phase 1 often is just looking at safety issues in humans, and they're not even looking at the benefits. Although if you're running a company, whether a pharmaceutical company or this company, you may want to like collect that data and kind of make sure that that's working too. So but phase 1 usually in FDA trials is just safety. So phase 0 is the data you get in animals to submit to the FDA to tell them you're going to do a phase 1, and you're like, this is why we have a reason to believe it does collect, in this case, usable signal, and it's safe. And you have all these animal studies, and then you have a panel of engineers, physicians, other people at the FDA who look at that and kind of hear your thesis, see your data, and then they say, okay, go ahead. And they're what they're doing is they're proving the study, the phase 1 or the phase 2 or 3, and sometimes there's phase 4s even, but those are like big follow-up studies. But anyway, but they're approving your study design so that when you spend all this money and you do it, they're making sure that the results are going to be acceptable. So they're sort of pre-approving your study design so you don't waste a bunch of money. So they don't have you like run a study and then come to them for the first time and they're like, you didn't collect this, you didn't collect this, because these the human studies are insanely expensive. They're generally 30 to 50 grand a person. So if you want to collect on like 40 people, that's $2 million. You want to collect on 400 people, that's $20 million. So these things are very expensive. And a lot of it's because just the sheer amount of administration required. You have to hire a bunch of people. You have to have research nurses full time on site. You might have to have multiple sites to get that many people. You can't just have you can't just be at Duke and expect to get, or Harvard or wherever, and expect to get that many people. You often have to have many sites across the country, which means you have to have people employed across the country. So it's expensive. And they did try to innovate or update this 10, 20 years ago. They were trying to do a lot of studies in like India and stuff, places that were cheaper, just had a cheaper cost of living. And they had a lot of problems with bad trials. So there's a lot of private organizations, and some of them still exist. They're called CROs, clinical research organizations. So anyway, they have to deal with that after that. But right now they're just trying to get animal data. So that's why they're doing this. Anyway, guys, you guys are probably just more interested in what the neuroengineer thing is. So there you go. Yeah, no Python. They'd like it if you know C++. I don't know. I'm confused about the microscopy and optics. So I'm going to keep that in mind. Maybe as we look at the video. So anyway, last one I pulled up was the BMI applications, so brain machine interfacing applications, and they want a software engineer, so they probably want somebody with C++ for this, because Python's like a good kind of prototyping software, but you don't want to generally run software on Python. You want to C++ has more efficient libraries and yeah. So experience coding in C++, Python, or Swift. Yeah, I actually don't know. I've never used Swift. I'm not familiar with that, but reacts with real-time systems. So that's like what I was trying to do. You guys saw my disaster tech project. I was trying to interact with the eye tracker and the EEG thing in real time, but what I programmed is not industry quality. It works, but barely. Yeah, so they just want a programmer, and they're saying that like you're going to be working on BMI stuff, but you're probably going to be handed the designs and stuff here, and you just have to make it. Yeah, and that's why you have to be good at communicating with neuroscientists stuff. Okay, so that one's a little less interesting because yeah, you just need to be a software engineer and want to work on this stuff, which I can't imagine they have a hard time finding people like that. I know his companies tend to underpay though, because they give out equity and they assume the equity is gonna blow up. So, but that is a problem because I remember people in LA not making great money at SpaceX and working there for many years and working pretty hard too. And you can go to these companies that pay way better, and they're a lot less grueling too. So. That is part of the reason because every time he gives an announcement, he's like trying to recruit, obviously, which is a primary function of the CEO. But all right, guys, let's pull up the video. I'm just seeing. Oh yeah, see here. No prior experience in neuroscience is necessary. Okay, yeah, but they're building the robotics. All right, let's pull up the video. Okay, cool. Let's make sure the video's in this frame. All right.
And insert them into the brain. So the implant is kind of like this little puck.
Let me try again. Sorry, it doesn't sound that loud to me. Let me turn down the music.
First and like most immediate need for a robot is to be able to manipulate these threads and insert them into the brain. So the implant is kind of like this little puck of the secret sauce active electronics and the.
Okay, so I'm just pausing it. Oh. Is there feedback? Sorry. If there's feedback, I'm sorry. I hear feedback. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, I killed it. Yeah, okay, so that's the size of the device. That's impressive. That's cool.
Electrodes are these tiny little flexible threads that each at the very end have.
Oh yeah. Those are the threads. That's cool.
Have multiple little electrodes that if you get those electrodes next to a neuron, they can record what that neuron is doing.
The nature of the device that we're implanting and the way that we're implanting it allows for minimal reaction of the brain tissue to our device to increase the lifetime. In order to do that, the devices are extremely fragile.
The threads that we insert that contain the electrodes are tiny, sort of on the order of like 50 microns wide, 5 microns thick, 20 millimeters long.
Wow. Yeah, so I have no idea. I'm not a great material sciences guy, but I wonder if they're using like carbon. Maybe they're using all the what's that nano stuff called? All the carbon filament stuff. Maybe they finally got all that working in mass production enough that they can actually print filaments now, like the graphene and all that stuff. I don't know.
If you take one of them and sort of toss it into the air,
because that stuff is biologically inert. In supposedly in theory. I mean, you don't know until you try it, but I mean, they have tried out these materials, but anyway.
Sort of float off like a piece of hair. And those tiny little flexible hairs are too small for a human to handle, even like with tweezers, and that's where the robot comes in. Computer vision and software, essentially high reliability software, is really important. We've gone from not really being able to track the moving brain, which is critical for humans because the human brain moves a lot, to.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, that's really cool. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that when you take the skull off and you look at the brain actually pulses because your heartbeat. And usually, like the only things I've seen or been involved with is cancer surgeries, where you're just removing a part of the brain, or epilepsy surgery, and usually it's sort of a very gross level, meaning large, meaning not fine. Although, I mean, we think of it as fine as humans because, we're like ultra careful around the brain, but we can't be as precise or minute as these robots are. So, yeah, it's interesting because it does this pulsing thing. And I guess the robots and software and everything, they can eventually make stuff to compensate for that. That's crazy. That's cool. Yeah, generally you're trying to, you look at MRIs, images, and then you try to figure out an approach that goes through, because a lot of times you have to go through brain tissue. So you're trying to go through either the least amount of brain tissue or brain tissue that you think is the least consequential. And then they will do these mapping studies to zap different parts of your brain to see what's happening. And that's why sometimes they have to do these things while you're awake, so that they can see if you suddenly can't speak or something. When they zap something, then like, okay, we're not going to go through that, because if we do that and then wake you up, you're not going to be able to speak. So there's these really horrifying outcomes that are possible with brain surgery. So that's why they do the mapping stuff, and a lot of our neuroscience data can come from that stuff too. So anyway.
Having this OCT-based system that essentially gives us this 21 hertz real-time view of a 3D volume of the brain that we're looking at. What you're trying to do is like very fine computer.
Did he say 21 hertz? I didn't follow that.
Brain, which is critical for humans because the human brain moves a lot. To having this OCT-based system that essentially gives us this 21 hertz real-time view of a 3D volume of the brain that we're looking at. What you're trying to do is like very fine computer vision tasks and movement tasks to grab these threads. It's like an extremely hard engineering problem.
I would say the next big goal for the robot would be to make it so that there's minimal neurosurgeon interface, that a neurosurgeon can walk in and talk to the patient, make them feel comfortable about the procedure, walk them through exactly what's going to happen, and then essentially click go. And the robot will be able to figure out exactly what the specific topography of the patient will be, target the areas, and take the surgery from the patient coming in and sitting down to them walking out of the door that same day.
If we make this so automated and safe and fast that like anyone can get it, even the idea of really fast keyboard and mouse for myself that I don't need to use my hands for is like super alluring.
I'm excited for the robot to help a human patient restore someone's motor function that they lost. That would be super cool. Over the last 3 years, Neuralink has felt like it has grown from a garage project into a real product.
Not only do you get to work on robots, but you also get to interact with other people who don't typically.
I guess I'm trying to think of the restore motor function thing. I mean, maybe we can. I mean, there might be like a crappy patch around solution, like in the sense of we were talking earlier, like how the monkey has binary control without moving its arms, and then eventually you can develop that to higher level control. And then if that maps to like a robot arm or maps to like needles in your muscles that basically zap your muscles and cause them to contract, there's these like hackish workarounds that they probably are talking about, and then they'll try to develop and refine those over time. But see, when they say restore XYZ neural function, I always think, and I don't know how many people think this too, that they're going to replace damaged brain tissue with like working brain tissue. I think that's what most people think, and that's even what I think. And that's where I shake my head like, no, this isn't going to do that. Because he talks about, solving neural disease like Parkinson's and things like that. And, well, I mean, that one we even have a hackish solution where, because there's just that one's a weirdly simple one where just a single cluster of cells die, and then, so we can just shove a needle in there and try to zap it. But even that doesn't work as great as just having working cells. So I always hear this stuff and think, oh yeah, there's a guy at USC, his name was Theodore Berger, and he probably worked on this stuff maybe 15 years ago, and I think he's like a chancellor now or something. I think he does research anymore, but he was trying to replace damaged hippocampus with a computer chip. And it was this ridiculously ambitious project. But I think a lot of people think like that. I think like that. So when I hear stuff like that, I don't understand what, this is. This might be like such a downstream necessary link. It's like we're working on transistors in the 1940s or whatever. And eventually in the 80s, we get the Apple II GS, which required hundreds of thousands of transistors, for instance. So, but then this is all buried in the context of, in 5 to 10 years, that level of hype that Elon Musk pushes out there, like we'll be tweeting each other in like 10 years. That thing he does, and it's like, anyway. But I'm not to say that there's not ways you can work around damaged motor function and that this might help. But anyway, I don't know. It sounds like I'm being semantic, but it just kind of restore motor function. I'm not trying to just be critical. I just think it creates a visual in your brain that's very inaccurate. That's all. So anyway.
We'll use robots.
I knew nothing about neurosurgery before coming to Neuralink. I can come in as a robotics expert and know that there are neurosurgeons here, neuroscientists here, who essentially can act as my knowledge base for neuroscience.
Wait, I want to see who they shot for the neuroscientists.
Neurosurgeons here, neuroscientists.
No, I can't. I don't know who that is.
Who essentially can act as my knowledge base for neurosurgery and neuroscience. That's why I think it's the place to be.
Let's see. So it's cool because they have an OR there. I mean, there's an animal in that OR, but that's a pretty good recreation of an OR. I mean, they got like back here, they might either have imaging, like brain imaging, so that because the surgeons sometimes want to walk over and look at the brain imaging. There's also usually at the head of the bed there's an anesthesia station, and so then there's a bunch of controls for the gases and chemicals you use. So there's IV drips, and then there's also the gas that you use, some kind of something AIN, usually like isoflurane for animals. I don't remember all of them anymore, but and those are to initiate anesthesia, and then you use the IV to maintain anesthesia, and you intubate because often you knock them out so bad that they're not breathing on their own, so you intubate and stuff like that, and then you watch their oxygen levels and everything. So this is all the head of the station is usually run by the anesthesiologist, and the anesthesiologist is sort of like has veto power, but they're not in charge. So then the surgeon's in charge, but if the anesthesiologist is like, hey, and then the anesthesiologist also handles pain management. So what we do with humans is we monitor their vitals, and I've done a few anesthesiology rotations that when you see somebody's vitals start going up, it's like a stress reaction. Even though they're knocked out, it's like some more subconscious level, you can tell that they're feeling pain. So then often you increase the whatever the pain management drug is, so some sort of opioid or whatever, and that's how they titrate it. So they see when the surgeons start digging in there and they see the vitals start going up a little bit, they're like, oh, and then they kind of increase it. And then we have very basic like consciousness, like are you unconscious level stuff, and they do, I mean, you after a while everyone kind of reacts the same. They just sort of slump and you're like, yeah, they're out. Yeah, so that's what the head is. And then back in the day when we had the Da Vinci, this thing was like 6 times bigger. It was just hot, just sprawling over the bed on both sides. It was just a huge thing. It required this giant arm. So that's cool. And then the surgeons usually stand on one side and sometimes the other side. There's usually technicians, surgical ORs, and then there's sometimes somebody in the back. And then when you walk in, you scrub in, you walk in, and then these people help you get into your gown and everything because you walk in like this once you scrub in, and you have to back into the door so you don't use your hands to open the door. And then they often have gloves open for you, and you just put your hands in, and then you get into the gown, and then you double glove again usually, and then you already put on your mask and your hair cap before you walked in. So that's what you usually do, and they teach you like a 5-minute scrub-in procedure. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I don't know if this is in Austin or the Bay Area, but that they have all this stuff in house. I mean, that's pretty cool. He just like, well, let's just do it. Let's get everything in house. And I guess a lot of medical device companies must do this too. The medical device companies that have been around for a long time. But yeah, I realized that they're manufacturing a lot of surgical equipment. So yeah, that was the end of the video. Okay, guys. Well, yeah, I just wanted to check it out because I was interested in what they were up to. Let's see if we can find game animal. I'm just wondering if we have any more details on the paradigm itself. Oh, was he on a live stream somewhere? Wow. It's like an audio only a live stream if you're interested, like hour and a half. I don't know. He's apparently everyone's spamming Dogecoin, you know, that whole thing. Yeah, so he revealed it right here. He said, "Can monkeys play mind Pong with each other?" So they're playing Pong. So it's two-dimensional. So it's not necessarily. It's one-dimensional, but it's not necessarily discrete. So it's continuous. So it's a little better than binary. Which isn't. That's not really an advance compared to what they can do in the university systems, but I'm just saying that it is a one-dimensional control. So you're extracting levels of which, say, the right hemisphere or the left hemisphere is activating, rather than just a discrete which one's greater. But it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean that's what you would use at first to prove that it's working. Yeah, it's funny. That's what he said last year, right? Human trials later this year. That's so aggressive. I mean, again, if they can produce the phase 0 data for the phase 1, they can do safety trials in humans potentially. These people are probably not going to be contacted directly by the company. They're probably going to be dealing with tier 1 academic systems that. And then people in the academic system, like doctors or whatever, that are also professors who want to work with Neuralink stuff, you know, because it makes them look cool, you know, and then they can get grant money and press and, you know, stuff like that. And when they bring in more press, the university, that's all the university cares about. And then the university, you know, they get higher up in the university status. And so that's how it'll kind of go down. Can play video games. Yeah, so they're probably talking about Pong. It's this black and white. You guys seen that, right? It's just a moving paddle, and then you're trying to bounce the little moving dot back that moves like a bouncing ball or whatever. Okay, that's cool. So yeah, again, and then. I think they'll if they get things with a smaller footprint in humans. Let me turn the music back on. Sorry guys, I had that turned up because that video was kind of quiet, but yeah, they had if they can get that working with a smaller footprint, you know, they get the whole ecosystem working with the surgical implants. Maybe that allows, it's kind of like helping an access issue a little bit, you know, where more and more universities, it doesn't have to be the top tier universities. All the other ones, particularly in the United States, can get their hands on this, implant them in people. And then at the local level, kind of the organic level, you can have these doctor-patient interactions where they try to work these things out. And if they can get one kind of primitive application to work, like maybe once you get this implanted, it connects with one software program on your iPad, but it allows you to either, maybe it's just control the volume and a couple things like that on your TV. Because I think a lot of these people can still speak. So it's a weird problem because voice control, with like an Alexa or something might make more sense. As I've said, even eye tracking, if you can't speak, would make more sense than going into the brain. But if there's some little thing they can find, which it kind of makes sense for, it means tons of humans are going to start. People, very, very small select part of the population that are like paraplegic or whatever, are going to be able to get these implanted at their local sort of city hospital. Probably university center still, but but then the surgeons are going to want to be trained on this, especially if you're a neurosurgeon. It's just more interesting, especially if you're an academic neurosurgeon. And then and then there's going to be software that they work on that does something, like I said, something very specific. And then we're going to start getting more data, which is cool. And they're going to use the data mostly to improve the engineering, like the safety profile and the footprint and the signal profile of it. Again, not to solve the neural code problem, but at the university level, it's probably going to be like individual laboratories who are like, can we get our hands directly on the data coming off this thing? And can we continue to try to solve the neural code problem? Because that's the really long-term hard problem. And so I imagine it's mostly university laboratories that will be working on that problem. And that's another thing I think most people probably have a misperception of, that they are under the impression that Elon Musk and his company is going to be working on that. They're not going to work on that at all. And you can see it when you look at the job description. Nobody's going to try to, develop, harmonic neural networks or whatever, kind of like the grant I wrote for DARPA and stuff. It's going to be individual researchers who are just going to constantly try to make incremental progress on that. Because, and I guess that's one thing. That's usually what I used to do. I used to do like a little teaching session. So let me do one today. And I guess I wanted to do one that was more related to what we were talking about. So I just realized what a good one might be. It'll be a little more, I don't know, maybe it's not that interesting. A little more, that's my little blackboard. Okay. I just wanted to, I'll try to keep this in like 2 minutes today. Very, very fast. But I wanted to talk about, and I don't know how many of you are in the university setting, and it's kind of like there's just one or two machine learning concepts, and they call it machine learning, but where's my, oh wow, it's way up there. Okay. Let me fix my thing because it's really off the screen. Okay. This is whatever. We won't title it. Maybe we will. Okay. I feel like the title's going to scare people off, but it's like dimensional analysis and probability distributions. Because that's really what you're dealing with often when you're dealing with, here, we'll put it in some aesthetic print so it lures people in rather than scares people off. Oh, look, it's dimensional analysis and probability distributions. That's it. That's all we're doing. I just want to cover this. Like I said, each one of these in like 1 minute. This stuff. There's like lots of, I feel like, technical moats around these things that protect these things. But once you get to the concept, it's not that hard. And really often what you're dealing with is, where's my drawing tool? And then I gotta make it as fat as possible. There we go. Yeah. I guess I don't know how many of you concepts, how many of you are familiar with these concepts, but you've probably heard of normal distributions or Gaussian distributions. So I'm going to kind of draw one with my mouse. And then if you imagine another one, Okay, so this might seem already abstract, but what this represents is, say, we're looking at a single neuron somehow, and honestly, more likely with this Neuralink stuff and all that stuff, you have one of those threads they're talking about, and it's around. It's actually around a cluster of neuron. You know, you have the heads of many neuronal bodies, as you guys probably remember from your neuroscience. You have neuron bodies, and then you have these long axons, right? And then those things, the synapses, and then this one's receiving the synapses of different ones, right? So these clusters of the neuronal bodies, it doesn't matter, but as they're firing, they're having these positive and negative ion fluxes inside the cell, and it's doing that because it's pushing them out or it's bringing them in. So the fluid around this probe is changing. If that makes any sense? So you're pushing a bunch of negative ions out, and then it's pulling them back in, and that's partly how they're detecting it. They're probably ion sensors, although maybe potentially down the future we have like magnetic or electrical field sensors, and maybe they already do that. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but that's what they're doing. So the point is being they're not often putting a probe inside a cell and then they know it's in one cell. It doesn't matter anyway. And even if we're dealing with one cell, the concept's the same. So this x-axis down here is if you're looking at one cell or a group of cells, it doesn't really matter. But you have, sorry, let me make this clear. So obviously you have a bunch of these probes, right? But we only care. We're only looking at one of them. We're only looking at one of the probes, and the point is my point that I probably confused everybody with is that I don't whether the probe is inside of a cell or it's collecting a group of cells. It doesn't really matter, but we would prefer if it was inside of a cell and we had a probe inside of every single cell in your brain. That probably would be better. But the reason that these two things, dimensional analysis, probability distributions, are useful, and that's why, as like annoying as technical as they are, we kind of return them over and over in a lot of machine learning, is because this is what happens. So imagine this is the activity of the cell. So over here on the left side is when it's very inactive, and then here is like when it's maximally active. And so the probability distributions is it's like we're superimposing a nicer, smoothed out version of reality. That's all models are, right? So the data is going to be very noisy, but what we see if we smooth it out a little bit is it's still problematic because, let me draw this out all the way. Where's my, this actually extends all the way here, and this actually extends all the way here. Oh, I'm the best at digital chalkboard. All right. And the point is that the activity can be anywhere from low to high, right? And the graphs up here represent the amount of times that the activity is, say, at this level, like it's, say, at like whatever that is, 30%. Is it because the monkey was trying to move it to the left or to the right? And say the red one is to the right and the white one's to the left. So all probability is, and all Bayesian probability and all that complicated probability is trying to account for the fact that when I saw, like I looked at the activity for the last like 1 second and I saw it's about 30%. What does that mean? If we eyeball it, we're like, oh, it's probably trying to move it to the left, because that's literally at the peak of whenever it tries to move it to the left. And then let me put so we just have less likely for me to say something confusing. Right? But if you look at it, some percentage of the time down here, it's because the monkey was trying to move it to the right and it just happened to fire at 30%. And then some percentage up here it was trying to move to the left. So that's all Bayesian probability is doing. It's looking at, if you, now it's firing closer to like say 60% over here, it looks at what does 60% mean? And it says 60% means that of all the prior times we've recorded data on this and the monkey was trying to move it to the left, which is the white, it did fire at 60% of the time sometimes, but usually it was trying to fire on the right. That's what you're doing. So you're collecting a bunch of data, and you collect both of these curves separately. You have it move to the left a bunch of times, and it makes like a normal distribution. And then you have it move to the right a bunch of times, and it makes a normal distribution. And when you overlap them, often it's not even this clean. Let me draw what real fucking science engineering looks like. It looks something more like this. It looks like this. It's still normal distributions, everything, but it literally looks like. Nah, I'm not even doing it correct. It's more like this. This is what we're dealing with. It's like more overlap than not, and then we're trying to guess, which way it's going. Well, I'll skip the metaphor, but you can see how difficult this is. So it's not to say that their pattern, their activity is identical, right? It's not that we have no way to distinguish the two, but we don't have a perfect way or even close to a perfect way to distinguish the two. The vast majority of the time, in this like region, we're largely guessing. I mean, a lot of times, so even in this one is higher, right? Like let's say we had activity at this level. It's like, okay, go with the red, right? It's trying to move it to the right. And say this is the height of that right at this curve is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this simple. Let's say that's 10 and the height here is like 8, right? That means out of all the data points, we have 18 data points there, and 10 of them it was trying to move to the right, 8 of them was trying to move to the left. So a maximum likelihood, Bayesian, complicated, whatever approach, will say you're trying to move it to the right. But it's wrong, whatever that is, like 0.4 something percent, right? Or it's 45% of the time. You're still wrong. You're just right 55% of the time, which is better than guessing. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what machine learning is. That's what probability distributions are. That's what Bayesian is. And that's my little, it ended up being like 3 minutes, I'm sorry, lesson on probability distributions. Yeah, I don't know if I want to get into dimensional analysis because I thought I was going to do a 1 minute on each, but maybe I could do it. Anyway, that's what they're dealing with. So that's more at the university level where they're trying to sort of figure out the neural code. This honestly is what you're actually dealing with. If you get a curve separation that this good as I drew in my first example, you're doing pretty good, because if you calculate overall this curve, how many percentage of the time you'll be wrong and right, this will be pretty good. But this often is closer to what the real data looks like. And obviously the worst is if you have this, right? If you have these curves, wow, that wasn't even close. If you have the red curve like perfectly overlapping the white curve, then you're looking at a sensor that it might not even be in the brain. Maybe you're looking at weather data or something. You're looking at something that's just not correlated at all to whether the monkey was trying to move to the right or left, right? So this one I drew, at least there's some correlation. If you plotted this as a plot with correlation, the curve wouldn't be flat. There would be some tilt to it. If you have, say, a 2-axis plot and you just plotted a scatter plot on these axes, that's another way to plot data. It's all related. It's all related. And so that's what they're trying to do. So what you do, screw it, let's try it. I might scare everybody off, but let's do it. In order to get this curve better, let me just extend my blackboard down. What you do is dimensional analysis, and you're trying to get these probability curves better. And this is, and if you're in like psychology or something, and you're trying to deal with like survey data, it's the same thing. I mean, it's like this. If you're an investor, this applies to everything. So you don't have to be trying to giving yourself an aneurysm trying to analyze neural data. But if you're trying to predict whether some stock's going to go up or down, or you're trying to separate out people based on a survey, on a personality survey or something, And maybe that's an example we'll use because it's less esoteric than brain data. Here, let me, oh, there we are. Okay, so we're gonna do dimensional analysis down here. And again, I'm gonna try to give you like the core concept, because in my mind, like I said, I think there's a lot of moats dug around these concepts that are actually not that complicated. And the moats are like, technical language and math equations and really bad metaphors. And maybe my metaphors aren't great, but hopefully they're a little better. So I think, in just a couple minutes, you could probably get the core concept. And I'm trying to think, maybe this is a bad label for this because I know sometimes, whatever, I'm going to use this. Okay. So I don't know if you've ever heard like PCA, ICA. In animal neural data, they use a lot of PCA. There's a lot more newer dimensional reduction methods that they have used in the last 20 years. They've actually come up with finally, because all these things were super old, like ICA and PCA especially. Well, ICA is a little newer, but PCA. And it's partly because you need a lot of computational power to do this stuff. And we only had computers working from like maybe the 70s or 80s with a lot of headache. PCA you can actually calculate by hand, so that's why it's a little older. Anyway, in social sciences, they often talk about factor analysis, which is very related to PCA, but it's not exactly the same. There's SVD, singular value decomposition, if you're doing linear algebra. PCA is like SVD with a couple extra steps. Anyway, doesn't matter. Forget all the moat stuff. The point is, what are you doing? What is the point? And I'm trying to think of a good example. Imagine that you have a bunch of your friends. Maybe you go on Facebook, you look at I don't know if any of you are on Facebook anymore. I'm not on Facebook, but you look at your like top 10 friends, say, and 10 people in your life. I don't know if you guys have 10 people in your life. I don't think I do. But anyway, but say whatever. Somehow you manage to find 10 people in your life, maybe on Facebook or something. And you just pull them on what movies they like, for instance, and they can answer binarily. We're keeping this simple as possible, but I hope it's a good example. And let's do different colors. So like, I don't know. Maybe we have a couple comedy movies, and then we have a couple say romance movies, chick flicks, whatever they call them, and we have a couple mindless action movies, right? And we'll maybe make 3 of those, and then we have I don't know, some British guy doing documentaries, those things. I don't know, something like that, whatever. Or maybe it's YouTube videos or whatever. And everyone's just, and I'm not going to fill this whole thing out, but you basically survey people on these like whatever this is, 10 or 11 videos. And you're like, do you like it or not? Thumbs up or thumbs down? And you just mark all the thumbs up, and people are like, okay, I like that one, I like that one, and et cetera, et cetera. And what dimensional analysis, so I don't know if, just to restate what I did here, just because the whole point is to have a simple metaphor. You have a bunch of people and they say whether they liked or not, didn't like individual videos. And what you're trying to do is reduce them down to a smaller, you want to cluster them essentially, right? You want to, and that's another thing it's called, sometimes called cluster analysis or unsupervised learning, or it's all these fancy words for this stuff. It's all based on the stuff we did above, which is the correlation stuff. And all you're trying to do is reduce your 10 friends down to like, listen, there's just basically 3 types of people in the world. And, Johnny and Susie are basically type 1s. This guy is type 2s. That's what you're trying to do. That's all dimensional analysis is. And if you have this data, which is a matrix, and there's like all this stuff you can do in linear algebra and SVD and blah, blah, blah. And LDA is another one, by the way, latent Dirichlet analysis. And there's a million things, but it's all the same thing. All you're doing is reducing this down to a simpler, a more reduced matrix. So this side of the matrix is still the same. It's still all your friends. Oh, let me move this over, I'm sorry. But now you've reduced the headers to say 3 columns. And everybody starts fitting more cleanly into, you actually get values at this point. You get like 0.9, and then the value is very close to 0, hopefully. And then this guy is a 0.9 over here, or let's keep this very clean. And this is 0, 0. And then maybe these people are, maybe they're getting like 1s or whatever, and then there's 0s. Okay. This may be starting to get confusing, but I'm going to clean it up in a second. The point is, all these people here, let me use a different color. All these people here are your like type A's, or your you don't know what it is yet. But they like some kind of type of movies, and these people like a different. I'm gonna try to keep this as clean as possible because my handwriting is not very good, so I'm trying to keep the colors clear. These people, are these next 3, and I didn't draw all 10 out, but this is the result you get. And the point is, now you have, because you've established you wanted 3 clusters, you've reduced these all these individual YouTube videos or movies down to 3 types. And hopefully they primarily correlate with one of them, although sometimes you don't get that. And then what you can do is you can go back and look at each one of these categories and see what they are. So like, for instance, we'll just do one of them. We'll say Johnny and Susie, the first 2 people, were very basically cluster A. Like they're primarily these people. What does that mean? And then you go back and you look at all the weights. Oh, I'm off the screen. I'm sorry, guys. You go back and you look at all the weights, and there's going to be a weight for each one of these, because it's just a dimensional transform, which sounds very complicated, but all it is you're plotting data, and then you're just rotating things until it casts shadows onto a new axis. I might skip that for today, but it's actually not that hard. And what you're doing is you realize that primarily the biggest weights are these 2, and maybe all these movies. And so you're like, oh, people in cluster A really like what did I say? Humor, like comedies and documentaries. Okay. And then you go to the cluster B and cluster C, and they like different, and that's what you're doing. And you're trying to reduce observational data to more generalized data. And you're doing that, and all it's doing is basically running correlations, rotating the data, running correlations essentially, and trying to find the strongest correlations in a way, and trying to find the ways that would cause in between groups to be the least correlated or even anti-correlated in a way. And there's different ways you can do it. There's different parameters, but let's keep it simple. So the point, and I'm done with this, by the way, the point of the whole dimensional analysis thing is that what happens, now imagine these top ones are all different neurons. 10 neurons, 100 neurons, 10,000 neurons, which Neuralink is going to try to get up to. The way we're going to handle that, I mean, this is very rudimentary neurosignal analysis stuff, is you reduce this. You reduce that down to just a few dimensions, or independent channels of information, if you will, if you want to say it a little less mathematical. And then you go up back to this stuff that we did up here, which is the probability distributions. And maybe instead of getting this, you get something that's they're now more separated out because you did this. Maybe you take 10,000 channels of information, and you do some outlier exclusion. You figure out ways to exclude like 4,000 of them. You transform them. You like square the data, or you log transform the data, or whatever. This is all you do. You just keep playing around with the data, and then you dimensionally reduce it down to like 2 axes, and then you plot it again. And eventually, sometimes you find out ways that they separate out more, which means, if you recall from this one, instead of having like a 55% accuracy or something just above 50% barely, you might get 65 or 70 or 75%. You get closer to usability for humans. And that's it. So that's why these 2 concepts are really important. And you, again, this applies to everything. If you want to do stock market analysis, or you want to do psychological data, I'm going to survey people and come up with your own big five ocean or Jungian personality types or whatever. This is what you do. This is it. So I really feel like they should be starting with simple examples like in junior high or something, and then working backwards and showing people why, because they just launch you into linear algebra and you don't know why any of this is important. And even semesters later, you still won't get it. So that's what you're trying to do. You're just trying to be able to collect data from the world and condense it into some sort of meaningful generalizations. And that's what this lets you do. And then this up here lets you predict or correlate. You know, it depends on your causality. I mean, if you're you know, you're either labeling or you're predicting. If you're trying to guess something ahead in time, it's predicting. If it already happened, it's correlating and labeling, whatever. But yeah, that's it. It's not that bad. And imagine getting exposed to this over and over. This is not that hard. But for some reason, through the education system, I feel like this was not apparent to me for a long time. So anyway, that's my little knowledge warhead for today, which I wasn't planning on doing that, but actually made sense to do it. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything planned. It's still kind of early in the day for me, so I usually don't play games till later tonight, so I'm probably not going to do that today. But yeah, I did come up with some news items. I was looking at I kind of covered the Neuralink stuff. I might spend like 5 more minutes on other news items. I don't know if there's anything interesting though. Synchronization of brain hemispheres, what we hear. A brain responds to beauty. Oh God. Oh yeah, this was kind of interesting. Human blood-brain barrier have problems. I read that on my phone a day or two ago. It was just they have these culture models of the brain. They have some cell line that is supposedly the human blood-brain barrier that they've been doing research on for like 10 or 15 years. And according to this article, and maybe I'm getting the pop sci review of it because I'm not super into that research, they're just saying that the cells don't act very close to the actual blood-brain barrier in our head, so they're not very good models, and we have all this data and research we did that might not be good. So that was it. Games that boost brain power. Okay, we gotta click on that. I saw the caffeine one. I keep seeing this caffeine one. I did click on that one. We'll look at that really fast. The idea being, if you drink caffeine, you're pregnant. It changes the baby's brain. Apparently, there's evidence that shows that, which makes sense. I mean, your brain's. I feel like caffeine just kind of irritates your brain, and it causes it to be more aroused. Like if there's an arousal axis, there's a lot of axes. Again, because of dimensional analysis. See, it's already relevant. Like for instance, like in emotion research, you can think of like if you're very excited, it's high arousal, but it's also positive valence, meaning if it's negative or positive, right? And then there's high and low arousal. So you could think of, high arousal being excited and then very distressed, and then maybe low arousal, negative being kind of depressed and maybe a little bit happy. Maybe that's just like kind of content or something. So arousal is like an axis they often use in a lot of mental state stuff. I feel like caffeine just irritates your brain and increases your arousal. And so if you're doing that to a neonate or in utero, it will probably cause them to wire their brain a little differently, because your brain wiring. This is my own personal belief, but I don't think the genetics determine how your brain gets wired. I think the genetics are determining how, like, the cells get made and how they react. But because we all develop with eyeballs that connect to the back of the brain, the back of the brain then develops into a visual center. I don't think it's coded to develop into a visual center. I think it's just responding to the types of inputs it's getting. So similarly, if you increase if you give it some kind of change the input or the stimulation in utero, it's going to probably wire differently. So we'll look at that really fast. All right, let's go. Let's stick with those. Okay, I'm gonna say this for the end because maybe I'll regret it. But okay, this is off the screen. I apologize. MIT News: How the brain helps you remember what we see. Mental images bounce between the left and right brain. Oh, I hate this research. I hate this research because I feel like this is an artifact of our technology that records brains. That's why. It's very easy to see the difference between left and right brain, if that makes any sense. So does that mean your brain is lateralizing things? And I mean, there's certain things it does lateralize, like language. Like language is usually living on one side of your brain, which is cool because if you have the split brain people, one side of their brain can come up with the words for it, the other side can't. But the other side of their brain has like an eyeball and visual perception, everything hooked up. So it's seeing things, but it can't come up with the words for that. So that it's kind of a cool thing. But they do this, I don't know, I'm just skeptical whenever people come up with lateralized results. Lateralized meaning left to right. Explains experiments in animals, continuous track of what's important to us. The problem too is that any noise in the experiment, like if I'm looking straight ahead and I look to the right, the stuff ahead is now hitting the part, it's now hitting my left side of my retinas, which are then getting projected to, let's just keep it simple, left side of my brain. And if I look this way, it now hits the right side of my retinas and it gets projected to the right side of my brain. So without the visual information changing at all in front of me, just the smallest jitter in my eyes will lateralize the information. And it's not to say that maybe that is what we do. We like use more of our brain by doing that. I don't know, but what I'm saying is it could very well just be an artifact of something they didn't control for. So anyway, they had animals play a game, huh? Just like Elon Musk company. Oh, look at that. Images of objects, apples, bananas. And then they just had to say if the last object was the same as the next object, which you can train monkeys to do if you feed them. When they get the right answer, they'll figure it out eventually. So it's like a basic working memory task. I don't know the details of it. It might not be exactly working memory, but anyway, let's move on. Wait, which lab is that? It says Miller. Interesting. Well, in case some of you are interested, let me see if I can just find out where it was. I don't know if any of you are looking to go into grad school or anything, but the Peacower Institute for Learning and Memory. I don't know where that is, but Professor Earl Miller. Oh, he's a postdoc. Lead author. Oh no, yeah, that the lab, the professor is Earl Miller. I don't know who that is, but that's cool. Okay. But yeah, the caffeine one. Brain change in utero by caffeine. Analyzed thousands of brain scans in 9 and 10-year-olds. Oh, wow. They gave 9 and 10-year-olds. Oh, they scanned 9 or 10-year-olds who had moms that drank caffeine when they were pregnant. Interesting. I mean, my mom and grandmother, I think, were had mothers that smoked and, at least smoked and maybe even drank. So the caffeine thing seems a little innocuous, but by comparison. What makes it unique is that we have a biological pathway that looks different when you consume caffeine. Yeah, okay. This is all inference. Like the model part is just, after a while you realize it's a lot of overlaid philosophy on observational results. So sometimes you just want to see what they actually observed. I suppose the outcome of the study will be, okay, yeah. This is biased too because it's all these MDs and they love updating recommendations because that makes them more relevant. So in this case they had MD PhD students, and anyway, 9,000 participants. That's pretty cool. 21 sites across the country. Oh, you guys can't read that. I'm sorry. Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Just let me know. Thank you. Researchers point out that it's Unclear if the impact of caffeine on the fetal brain varies from one trimester to the next. Yeah, so they just haven't studied in detail. Retrospective study. So they scanned people who are already 9 or 10 years old. So it's hard to know too, because it could be that. So this is your classic example of study quality, right? So retrospective studies, at least they're examining humans, right? But it's not as good as interventional studies, not as good as double-blind interventional studies. And the reason is, for instance, in this example, what could be happening is that moms that drink caffeine when they're pregnant there's other qualities about them that moms who don't drink caffeine, like maybe moms that drink caffeine are more likely to have, are more likely to keep drinking caffeine. Maybe they're more likely to give their kids caffeine or sugar even after they're born. So maybe all these effects they're seeing in the 9 to 10-year-olds were because, even the last week or month, they were fed differently than the kids who didn't have moms that drink caffeine during pregnancy. You know what I mean? It could be like a home or lifestyle issue. It could be like those moms are more likely to have executive jobs, and that's a home life thing that's causing their brain to change, like maybe compared to people who don't have parents with executive jobs. Maybe you can imagine a bunch of things, like maybe they don't see their kids as much, or maybe they're more I don't know, whatever. And so any of those things could be causing the change in the brains that they're seeing in these kids. It might not have anything to do with the in utero difference that they were surveying for in the study. That's the problem with retrospective data, but it's always the first step. So anyway, let's move on. Did your brain evolve to be depressed? Yeah, I think so. That's always been my impression. Does it evolve to be discontent, I think, is what I like to say. Not depressed maybe, but like slight depression and discontentness, I think, is the base state, default state of your brain, and probably motivates us to go out, stimulate ourselves, challenge ourselves, and as soon as you stop, it just returns, and it's kind of torturous, but it's sort of the evolutionary wiring that keeps us motivated. I mean, if we're perfectly content people and we're wired that way, how motivated would we be, right? Things cause you to sort of move and act, and it's probably negative things, discontentness and depression, and maybe it's just little bits, but yeah, I'm not even gonna look at this article because it's a Medium article anyway. Okay. Games that boost brain power. Okay, there's these little companies that pop up all the time trying to take advantage of this stuff. I'm just curious. Exercise memory, brain, speed, attention, people skills, intelligence, and navigation. Okay. Wow, they got on some... Oh, this is advertisements. Okay, let's see what the video looks like.
Amanda Wormer's
This looks like a...
game chess knows.
Okay, let me mute this. This looks like one of those old TV... What do they used to call it? You know what I'm talking about? Those like 3 a.m. things where they're trying to sell you stuff. Like they take out like a knife and they can't even cut a banana with it or whatever because they just found a crappy knife, and they're and then like, look at our knives. Like it's one of these things. Yeah, it looks like they just have board games and stuff, and they're trying to put the extra spin on it that it's good for your brain. But I mean, all games are good for your brain. I mean, anything that engages you and stimulates you is good for your brain. If you get into woodworking, that's probably good for your brain. Painting little figurines. I don't know. It's a little. They used to have this store in. I was living in LA, and Santa Monica Mall near the Santa Monica Pier. They had this. I think it was a chain store which had all these like brain challenge, like the whole store was marketed as a brain challenge stimulation thing. I don't remember the name of it, but they had all these like puzzles and stuff in it, and it was just like, they had chess and stuff like that. They had it wasn't, and they had children's toys like this. They had some 3D puzzle stuff, but I don't know. It's a little bit of an overreach. It's like saying, like, I could erase the entire narrative on this thing and come up with a different one and say these are wellness games, you know, because you're engaging your brain, maybe you're reducing your stress over time, you know, and it improves your wellness. I mean, I don't know. It you know, it doesn't have to be brain training, but anyway, I was just curious. They clickbaited me successfully. Good job. Anyway, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I see we got quite a bit of people around today. That's awesome. Unfortunately, I'm gonna get off, so I'm the worst because I don't know how to accrue people and snowball it and capitalize on that. I have no idea what I'm doing, so I don't know what I'll be on next. I'm just the worst. But at some point, yeah, I'll probably pull up the neurotech stuff. I just hit a wall with it mentally, and I just need to take a break from it. I am gonna get probably some more funding for it, hopefully, so that'd be cool. It's always a crapshoot with the funding stuff. You know, you spend so much time writing like a 20-page grant, but there's like a director there they're interested in it, so we'll give it a shot. But I got to get my energy back up before. I mean, I work full time. I do all these little side projects. I'm including streaming very erratically and some podcasts and stuff. And then on the side, I'm trying to work on this neurotech stuff. And so at some point, I got to get my energy up and try to write the 20-page grant with a budget and everything. But that will really help because I you know, to cover costs and materials and stuff, and also get my motivation up because after a while, it's a very sweaty, horrible project sometimes with no reward. So yeah, I might get back into that at some point. And maybe later I'll just come on and play games and something like that. I'm really into BattleTech these days. It's like this mech game. I never played the board game, but it's based on a board game. And what else? Crusader Kings, that's fun. I totally got sucked in that. It's a very complex game. And then, oh yeah, Elite Dangerous, which is the flying game. Yeah, I got a double joystick thing and everything. So, but yeah, I don't think people are that interested in the game stuff, but yeah. Anyway, I appreciate very much you guys coming in. Anybody writing in chat or even lurking, thanks a lot. Makes me feel like people are around, which is awesome. I'm not in my office by myself. I'm with you people, so that's cool. I appreciate it. I guess it's Tuesday afternoon / evening, wherever you are. Maybe, I don't know. How does it work if you go more west? Anyway, yeah, late at night, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I hope you have a good one, a good week. Yeah. If you guys ever have any questions too, or I want to interact, I guess you can send private messages on Twitter or Twitch rather. I've gotten one or two of those. So that's cool. You could try to tweet me too. I think my Twitter is on on Twitch. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe you don't. I can't imagine if I was watching myself, I probably would just be lurking and not say anything. So I don't know. But I'm just trying to be a little better about it. I'm just kind of doing this erratically and stuff. So anyway, thanks again. Have a good one. Hope you guys find another and more entertaining Twitch channel after I get off. All right, later guys. Bye.